brilliant to be here with all of you. What if I told you you do not even know your value, how much you're worth? How would that make you feel to hear? Warm and fuzzy? The kind of life-affirming platitude you expect from an event run by Christians? Or maybe suspicious? You want to know what the agenda is behind those words before you can take them seriously? Well, you'd be right to be suspicious. Let me give you the context for those words. Stefan Ibongwe had fled Cameroon. As an albino child of black parents, his life was in constant danger. Albino people's body parts were valued for charms and spells. But having found refuge in Italy, Ibongwe has been able to become a campaigner for the plight of albino people in Africa, even speaking at the UN. And as part of his work, he put on a documentary in which he went back to Cameroon. And he interviewed a witch doctor, one of the people who use albino body parts in their work. And the witch doctor looked at him and said, "You do not even know your value, how much you're worth. Albinos are in great demand. Albinos just like you. From your hair to your bones, you are so sought after." Isn't that cheap? How much is a human worth? Suspicion is a natural response to asking that question, because we can't be uncritical about the way people answer it. History tells us some have answered that question in a way that allowed them to get away with unspeakable things. The way we answer this question shapes how we view ourselves and others, how we treat ourselves and others, how we navigate life. And so the theme for this whole week is human. What does that word, human, say about us? We sometimes say things like, "I'm only human," which is code for don't expect too much. But other times we talk about being humane rather than inhumane, a way of saying how good, how generous human beings are supposed to be. So which is it? That's why we're so glad you're here, to think through these things with us, to probe what we believe Jesus has to offer. Because these are questions we all have to think about. And we want to hear what you think, what you care about. And we want to share what we think and what we care about. This lunchtime, our focus on human value takes in one more strand, whether science is able to tell us what we're worth. And that question is worth asking because of the undeniable goodness and power of science in our lives. On Saturday, my wife was in a really serious car accident. Amazingly, she's not physically hurt, but scientific developments made a difference at every point to paramedics finding her and getting to the hospital. CT scans and X-rays allowed skilled medical professionals to look after her, see that she was okay. And I can't tell you how grateful we are that our world is like that. Day to day, our lives unfold like that. Science is at the forefront of our brightest hopes, at the heart of the things that we care about. It looms so large in our thinking that some have said that science is a functional replacement for God, for what our forebears centuries ago would have found by believing in God. And so some people talk about a God of the gaps. They say that people only ever turn to God to answer the questions they couldn't. And the more science has enabled us to see and do, the smaller our gaps of ignorance have become. And so the less and less space for God there is. But it's not just space for God that's become smaller. We have too. The late great Professor Stephen Hawking put it like this in an interview. The human race is just a chemical scum on a moderate-sized planet, orbiting around a very average star in the outer suburb of one among 100 billion galaxies. We are so insignificant that I can't believe the whole universe exists for our benefit. As science has enlarged our vision of the universe, it's put us in our place. Strip it all back, and that's where we're left. Just a chemical scum. Is that a true statement When I was an atheist, it's what I used to think. But I'm not persuaded now, and I don't think you should be either. I want to raise a couple of questions this lunchtime. First, can science tell us what human ingenuity is worth? As I've been saying, science is an amazing example of our value as thinkers and knowers. But is it actually able to account for our capacity to think and to know? Even asking that question raises the issue. You see, there are two ways that something can be beyond science. One way is to be out of its reach, like the God of the Gaps idea, and that is a bad argument. The centuries past have shown us that science reaches further than people thought it could. But there's another way something can be beyond science. Not out of its reach, but beyond science, because it's something you have to have in place in order to do science at all. Beyond science, because they're the axioms we have to assume in order to think scientifically. Before its reach, if you like. So things like mathematics, the laws of logic, we can't assess these things empirically because they underlie the entire empirical process. Try to use science to prove them, and it's a circular argument. And there's more. The processes by which we come to understand reality are, science tells us, nothing more than evolved survival strategies. Take God out of the picture, and that process is entirely unguided. If there's nothing more than chemistry bubbling away in our brains, what possible reason do we have for trusting them in what they tell us about the world? Francis Crick once famously declared this: you, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behaviour of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. To which the theoretical physicist John Polkinghorne replied, if Crick's thesis is true, we could never know it, for it destroys rationality. Thought is replaced by electrochemical neural events. The very assertions of the reductionist himself are nothing but blips in the neural network of his brain. In order to do science, first we have to posit ideas of rationality and logic. Take those away, and we undermine ourselves as thinkers and knowers. And that applies all the more for areas of knowledge outside of the sciences. Sir Roger Scruton, the philosopher, gives us an example of how the arts show us things. He writes, music is certainly part of the real world, but it's perceivable only to those who are able to conceptualize and respond to sound in ways that have no part to play in the physical science of acoustics. It helps at this point to register a protest against nothing buttery. It is just as absurd to say that the world is nothing but the order of nature, as physics describes it, as to say that the Mona Lisa is nothing but a smear of pigments. None of us want to deny that music has a reality, that the Mona Lisa is more than a smear of pigments. Science can't account for human ingenuity without becoming incoherent. And that's why even those who appeal to science alone are inconsistent about it. Take this moment from Professor Richard Dawkins of this university. In a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect. If there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. It's very well expressed, but there's a huge inconsistency here. It's the word we. Hang on. The universe we observe, the properties we should expect. Where do we fit in? In this very passage, you have someone who isn't blind. I think Professor Dawkins would be offended by the suggestion he was blind. Who isn't pitiless, because to use and understand that word, you can't be pitiless. Who isn't indifferent. That is the very last word anyone will ever use to describe Richard Dawkins. Inconsistency. And that applies to my second question. Can science tell us what human dignity is worth? Writing in the 19th century, the essayist William Hazlitt writes this: "Man is the only animal that laughs and weeps, for he's the only animal that is struck with the difference between what things are and what they ought to be." If we look past his outdated language, which wasn't meant to exclude women then, you can see the point he's making. We live our lives acutely aware of the difference between how things are and how we're sure they ought to be. Science is magnificently capable of telling us about how things are, but can it determine how things ought to be? Bucking centuries of philosophy since David Hume, Sam Harris, the American neuroscientist, wants to say yes. And in his book, The Moral Landscape, he gave it the subtitle, How Science Can Determine Human Values. He leans on the well-being of conscious creatures as his formula for an ethical system drawn entirely from science. And, as one of the so-called new atheists, very important to him, this would be a God-free way of doing ethics. But does it work? As a fellow atheist, the Australian philosopher Russell Blackford has real sympathy with Harris's project. But as an academic philosopher, he has problems with it too. And he writes this: "If we presuppose the well-being of conscious creatures as a fundamental value, much else may fall into place. But that initial presupposition does not come from science. It is not an empirical finding." Harris is highly critical of the claim associated with Hume that we cannot derive an ought solely from an is, without starting with people's actual values and desires. He is, however, no more successful in deriving ought from is than anyone else has ever been. Blackford's right. Questions of ethics and morality, which are so close to our heart, can be informed by scientific findings. But science alone can't account for their validity. Now, please don't mishear me at this point. I'm not saying that if you're not religious, then you don't believe in moral values. I'm sure you do. I'm not saying that you therefore treat people worse, or that Christians or other religious people are any better. But the issue here is, why act that way? Why take human dignity seriously? And that's the point. Human dignity is an idea we cherish. We know we couldn't live without it. If you're a fan of the musical Hamilton, think of that amazing statement from the American Declaration of Independence, penned by Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they're endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Analysing that, the American novelist and academic Marilyn Robinson makes this observation. Jefferson has used scripture to assert a particular form of human exceptionalism, one that anchors our nature, that is to say our dignity, in a reality outside the world of circumstance. What would a secular paraphrase of this even look like? In what non-religious terms is human equality self-evident? Science cannot access a reality outside the world of circumstance, so it can't tell us what human ingenuity is worth, and it can't tell us what human dignity is worth. And so as a result, even if we think that science can tell us everything, we can't be consistent with that position. We abandon it on a daily basis to engage in acts of thinking and knowing, of caring and valuing. Why is that? Why do we find it so hard to embrace the consequences of what science alone can tell us? Why are we craving more than the world as science describes it? It's not just because this perspective is logically inconsistent. It's inconsistent with who we are. There's a moment in Joseph Conrad's Lord Jim when Marlowe meets the butterfly collector, Stein. And looking at a butterfly on a dung heap, Stein says this in his broken English: "This magnificent butterfly finds a little heap of dirt and sits still on it, but man he will never on his heap of mud keep still." He wants to be so, and again he wants to be so. He wants to be a saint, and he wants to be a devil, and every time he shuts his eyes, he sees himself as a very fine fellow, so fine as he can never be, in a dream. And because you cannot always keep your eyes shut, there comes the real trouble, the heart pain, the world pain. Why all our angst? Why the gap between who I am with my eyes open and who I am with my eyes shut? Or take the discovery of Václav Havel, former president of the Czech Republic, dissident under tyranny. Writing an essay about the experience of individuals under communism, he observed this: individuals can be alienated from themselves only because there's something in them to alienate. You see, there's more going on inside each one of us than scientific inquiry alone can fathom. It seems self-evident to us that we are valuable, but in order to make sense of that value, we need to understand where it comes from, to ask, who gives us that value? After all, value is only a meaningful category if there's someone to do the valuing. And that someone cannot just be us valuing each other. Because although human history can give us inspiring examples of a few people doing that, I dare say many more are like the witch doctor in Cameroon, for whom the value of others comes down to the benefits they bring me. No, we need a definition of our value that works beyond the four walls of what I think, or even what my culture right now thinks. A definition that makes sense of life as we live it, that tallies with our observations and longings and experiences. Not the way of life that can only see Mona Lisa as a smear of pigments, or can only conclude that our moral reasoning is at the level of opinion and nothing more. Where could that definition of us come from? Maybe the same place our idea of human dignity came from. Returning to the US Declaration of Independence, here's how Yuval Noah Harari critiques it. His books are unmissable at any Waterstones ever, and he speaks from a perspective of evolutionary anthropology. He says, according to the science of biology, people were not created, they have evolved, and they certainly did not evolve to be equal. The idea of equality is inextricably intertwined with the idea of creation. The Americans got the idea of equality from Christianity, which argues that every person has a divinely created soul, and that all souls are equal before God. Harari does not believe that Christianity is true, but he is absolutely right to pinpoint it as the source. Let me read you some of the words attributed to Jesus from one of the earliest accounts of his life, Mark's Gospel. Jesus says, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul?" Jesus is asking, what good would it be to get everything you ever dreamed of, and then forfeit your soul, lose it all? Because according to Jesus, something about you is immeasurably precious. No amount of intellect, wealth, or success could ever add to that value. No lack of intellect, wealth, or success could ever diminish it. That radical idea is where our concept of equal human rights come from. It's a definition of us big enough to encompass our value as thinkers and knowers, as carers and valuers, as human beings. But Christianity isn't just the seedbed of ethical concepts we rather like these days, because if that's all it were, it would never have gotten off the ground. These ideas were so countercultural in the ancient world. No, these claims are anchored in who Jesus claims to be and all that he said and did. In Jesus, Christians believe that the maker of all things, the value giver at the heart of reality, has stepped into his world, the author writing himself into the story. So he's able to speak from a perspective beyond our reach, but he's not willing to stay beyond our reach, stepping in as one of us so that we can know him and love him and be valued by him. To return to Professor Hawking, of course the whole universe doesn't exist for your benefit. But the one for whose benefit it does exist loves you, values you. Now maybe you're suspicious of that claim just hearing it now. Now I wouldn't blame you for that. But why not look closely at the one making it? Follow where these words led him, to his death. A death he willingly embraced in weakness and shame because he insisted it was the death that would make us whole. A death that he offers as a true statement of what he thinks we are worth. See, he doesn't value us because of the benefit it brings him. He values us at cost to himself. So please do come back tomorrow when we're going to dig into the evidence behind the claim I'm making, looking into the Jesus of history. Because these aren't assertions you have to accept blindly. This historical figure invites you to investigate. So why not meet the one who comes to face our questions himself? The one who made ideas of human dignity and equality intrinsic to how we think and what we value. Why not weigh the evidence for his claims and see where it leads you? Because Jesus' claim is that he can make sense of life in all its splendor and shame. As value giver, he can make sense of us and show us our worth, a definition of us and reality that enriches and enlarges us. That's what's on offer. And we'd love you to use human this week as your chance to test that and see for yourself.